My keynote today is about this moment in time that we're finding ourselves in. More specifically, why we're still really early on AI, but also really fucking late. It's May 2026. What has happened the last couple of weeks? Well, Mythos, a model that Anthropic has launched, has found a lot of cybersecurity vulnerabilities that have never been found before. GPT 5.5 launched and is saturating a lot of benchmarks. Basically, benchmarks aren't good enough for the model capabilities anymore. And so that kind of begs the question, is Europe winning at the LLM frontier? What is Europe doing in this race? And the hard answer is no. We're not winning on the LLM frontier. We're nowhere near winning. We have an amazing company in Mistral in Paris, but they have raised 100th of the funding that Anthropic and OpenAI have raised. And so unfortunately, the frontier looks a little bit more like this graph, where you can see OpenAI's revenue, you can see Anthropic's revenue, who have just crossed 30 billion in annualized revenue run rate, and then you see Mistral in the line in blue somewhere at the bottom. So no, unfortunately, right now, Europe is stuck somewhere 12 to 18 months behind the frontier. We are not winning. At the same time, however, Anthropic has achieved something remarkable. They owned coding agents and enterprise applications and have been the fastest growing company in history. 30 billion ARR run rate. This is absolutely unheard of. And so one analysis extrapolated the current growth rate of Anthropic into the future and basically said if Anthropic keeps growing at its current revenue run rate, they would equal all of global GDP in January 2028. And so that begs the question, well, will Anthropic be the last company? There's this wording going around, Anthropic will be the last company, the AI model companies are going to own everything. And I'm so sorry, dear Dario, but I think that's also not quite true. I know that he recently, and he has all my respect for that, won over the heart of our Pope. And Anthropic is doing some fantastic work. I think they deserve all of our respect. But Anthropic will not be the last company. I want to make the case for why, while in LLMs, we're already really fucking late, we're still really, really early when it comes to a couple of the other pieces that are going to be key in the AI race. So let's walk through it. Well, why are people saying that Anthropic will be the last company? There is this idea that Anthropic's models are going to grow so capable that they're going to grow more capable than any human in any task. They're basically going to be able to do the work that all of us do behind a screen or in the real world at some point. Now, what is a job? A job at the end of the day is a bundle of tasks. That's how economists look at jobs. What do we think AI can do? Well, AI, as it progresses, will at some point be able to automate certain tasks. Now, it is the case that today, while AI is super powerful, it's still jagged. We say AI is jagged when we mean that it's uneven. It's basically able to do some things superhumanly well. You know, think about the fact that it has encyclopedic knowledge. You can basically ask it anything. It can sift through vast amounts of information much more quickly than any of us ever could. But it still also remains below human benchmarks and thresholds. For example, when it comes to complex or common sense reasoning. And so there are still some tasks that AI cannot do today. Economists call these tasks weak links. Weak links are basically tasks that AI simply can't do. Let's take the example of a nurse. A nurse, when she's tending to her patient or when she's changing the sheets, AI can't do that today. These are tasks that live in the physical world. And so these weak links are bottlenecks. And AI, even if it's super powerful, as long as weak links remains, weak links basically throttle the speed at which AI can diffuse through society. They basically become like a small valve through which AI must pass in order to get in front of our doorstep. Now, why does this mean we're still really early? There's research from Anthropic. I'm going to bring it up on the slide. This is basically, you know, the circle that you see here is all of the jobs in the world. Anthropic basically mapped all the jobs. And then in blue, you see Anthropic's models and what they're already able to do. And you see some jobs, especially the jobs that people do who sit in front of a desk, in front of a screen, where the model can already do most of the tasks that are associated to that job. But there's some jobs where, you know, many, many tasks are still out of distribution of AI, especially the jobs that sit in the physical world. Then you see another chart, which is the chart in red. You see this red part of the graph. The red part of the graph shows how people are actually using AI. So not what AI can theoretically already do, but the way that all of us are using AI in our day-to-day lives. Why is the red part of the chart smaller than the blue part of the chart? Well, it's fairly simple. AI is growing at exponential speeds, but us humans, we don't grow at exponential speeds. We don't adopt AI at exponential speed. Humans are slow to change. And so again, humans are a bottleneck for AI diffusing through society. Model companies exist to make everything blue, and then at some point to make everything red. What are model companies doing right now to make everything red? I'm sure many of you have heard about this. There is a craze in the market about forward-deployed engineers. Model companies are essentially hiring people like us to sit at the customer's side, to hold the customer's hands, and to figure out how to decrease this model capability overhang and actually make model capabilities useful in the real world. Now, why does this mean that we're still really early? Because as humans change very slowly, there is a lot of change management, a lot of work that is required in making deep AI adoption work. And as long as OpenAI and Anthropic are hiring vast amounts of people to actually get AI diffused in the real world, I think we're still really early, and there's plenty of opportunities for application layer companies to do that work better because they have customer trust, they have customer context, they have a brand that they can build, and so I think this shows that we're still really early. Another reason for why I think we're still really early is I think we think about intelligence in two simple terms. There are certain tasks, I would call them intelligence hungry, that can basically deal with an infinite amount of intelligence. Let's take a really easy example. A sci-fi novel. You're writing a sci-fi novel. The more capable a model you have, the more powerful a novel you can write. You create an action movie. Better models will always be able to give you more creative outputs. There are some tasks, drug discovery, innovation, R&D, that are open-ended. You want more intelligence to be able to get more results. But then a lot of the stuff that we do day to day in our business jobs are actually, I would call them intelligence-full. They don't need infinite amounts of intelligence. Let's use payroll automation as an example. All of us get paid, we have jobs, we get paid once a month. At some point, AI capabilities will be powerful enough to automate payroll. You won't need infinitely intelligent models to be able to do that. The only optimization criteria is going to be who does the job the fastest and the cheapest. And I think that's a massive opportunity in showing how early we are, because guess what? The big AI labs, the big model companies have one optimization criteria. They want to sell you a maximum amount of tokens for the highest margin possible. Versus us, intelligence consumers, enterprises, customers, we want the highest amount of intelligence for the lowest cost possible. And so this is a classic, we call it principal agent problem, where there's two sides of the market, and it needs for an independent layer of companies that basically broker on behalf of the interests of end consumers and customers in terms of making use of all the different model capabilities, open source models, small models, and not just the frontier companies. So another reason for why I think it's still really, really early, the fact that a lot of our business work will skew towards intelligence-full tasks will mean there is a huge optimization in terms of bringing down the cost and optimizing to bring inference towards smaller and cheaper models. Now, many people say, but Judith, there's still vast concentration going on. I mean, there's just no beating around the bush. NVIDIA is large, Google is large, and they're growing ever larger. And that's true. Actually, let's go back 500 years. Let's look at the commerce market. The commerce market 500 years ago was fairly simple. You had a butcher, you had a milkman, you had a fishmonger, and then we had automation. We had supply chains, production processes. What actually happened is the market concentrated. You had some big companies, think Coca-Cola, Procter & Gamble, Unilever, Walmart, but also the market became a lot more complex because as productivity grew, you were able to do certain things productively that before just didn't make economic sense. And you had a massive specialization of the market. You have packaging, branding, cooling, supply chain, wholesale, retail, distributors. The list goes on. So I make the case that as something grows more productive, gets more automated, yes, you see concentration, but you see specialization and market fragmentation at the same time. And so it shows we're still really early. I believe the AI market in 20 years from now is going to look a lot more like the commerce market today, and it's not all going to be owned by Anthropic and Google. Now, there's a lot of men in the room. The case that I always make, the analogy is men always make the case that it is perfectly fine to wash your hair, your body, with like a 3-in-1 shampoo, conditioner, body wash, and my husband will, until today, make the case that it is perfectly fine to use this product. But all the women in the room know that the men are lying to themselves, because the reality looks like this. The reality looks like a vast amount of different products, a hair mask, a hair oil. And so you could argue that these are just two perspectives on the same problem. One is the AI of the everything bagel story. One is, you know, like one size fits all type solutions, and the other one, I would argue, the women have, you know the right story or the real story here. The other story is one of branding, of differentiation, where you have arguably the same product just packaged in different ways. AI will look the same. But so this was all the reasons for why it's still really early, and you know, even though we're not winning on LLMs, I think there's still a big case to be made that we can be winning. The issue is, and why it's really fucking late, is that a lot of AI is really intelligence hungry. I'm not sure if some of you heard, but we're kind of going through what we would consider a compute crunch, right? So all the data centers that we're building, the $800 billion that are being invested in AI, CapEx infrastructure in the US today, the biggest infrastructure investment the world has ever seen, it's still not enough in terms of the demand that is coming our way. Now, what's the bad news for Europe? Europe has no compute. We basically have, if you look at current compute capacity, and this is a chart from Epoch AI, Europe has around 5% of the world's AI compute. The US has about 80%. And so we have nowhere near enough compute capacity to actually inference the kind of intelligence that we will be needing from a demand perspective. So again, on the compute piece, we're kind of late. But I want to give you one story and a real role model in many ways about why this doesn't mean that the story needs to be over for Europe. It's not game over for Europe. Why? Who shows us the light? Who shows us the way? Bear with me. Elon Musk. Okay, I know a lot of people are going to roll their eyes and be like, Judith, I can't believe that you're bringing up this guy. I mean, Elon Musk minus his politics are fucked up. But Elon Musk, what did he get absolutely, absolutely right? He built XAI. Who here knows XAI or has used Grok, the LLM from XAI? Okay, a couple of people. So he built Grok, which is an LLM that's pretty bad. It's not very good. Not a lot of people are using it or paying for it. Did that mean that it was game over for Elon Musk in AI? No, because what did Elon Musk realize? He realized that he may not be winning on the LLM frontier, and so he bought 500,000 GPUs from NVIDIA and built two of the world's biggest data centers, Colossus 1 and Colossus 2. He basically bought up a huge part of the AI compute supply chain and locked in a really scarce resource. And so today, that allowed him to cut massive deals with leading AI companies. He cut a big deal with Cursor that you might have heard about, and he just cut a big deal with Anthropic. So arguably, even though Elon Musk with XAI is losing on the LLM frontier front, he is still very much winning in the overall AI race. What does this show us? It shows us that Europe needs to identify the bottlenecks because value will accrue there. We need to project into the future and figure out what are the bottlenecks that remain that will still be valuable, and how can we move radically, mobilize public, private funding in order to double down on those bottlenecks. I want to be a little bit more concrete. Judith, what are those bottlenecks? Well, there's a lot of talk about LLMs, so next token prediction, that paradigm, not sufficing in terms of bringing us to AGI. A lot of people are now very excited about something that we call embodied intelligence. So embodied intelligence rests on two things. On the one hand, robotics, and on the other hand, world models. World models are essentially, you can think about them like video simulation models that simulate the real world and have an understanding of the physical intelligence of the real world. Lots of companies, including exciting European companies like Amy, like Black Forest Labs, are working on building world models. And we actually, in terms of the data that is required to train these models, still have one of the most important manufacturing bases in Europe. So we have a lot of the key companies that are required to win at the frontier of robotics and world models. This will be the next bottleneck. We can't quite see it today because the robots aren't roaming the streets, but there will come a time in a couple of years from now where this will start to be the case. China is very much aware and is doing their part to win this frontier. And so what Europe needs to understand is that I hope we can find a way to catch up on LLMs, but it is not the only way. Elon Musk shows why to win in terms of building leverage in the AI world. We need to identify the next bottlenecks and own them. We have one company, ASML. It's a Dutch company. They produce lithography machines. It's the only company in the world that produces these machines. It's a massive bottleneck in the overall supply chain of getting compute built in the world. ASML is an incredibly valuable company, and I do hope that as a continent we understand how much leverage this company gives us, and that we need many more such companies that are just one puzzle piece, but a really crucial one. Without the entire AI picture cannot be fulfilled. And so where does that leave us? I believe it's never too late for Europe to go all in. We can decide that it's day one, every single day. We can decide to start sprinting for our lives. I think there's a beautiful slogan for this conference, which is crazy enough to try. I think we owe it to this continent to be crazy enough to try to every single day bring our best game and try and win the frontier of European AI, even though it looks absolutely ludicrous, given how fucking late we are at the same time. Thank you so much.